I am so excited to be back on the podcast with a solo episode. I figured I'd give you an update as to what I've been up to. Been pretty exciting around here. So I was in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. I am an instructor in the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program, and we were rounding out our semester with our final on-site activities and teaching. So that was lots of fun. And while I was there, there was a mountain bike race that was about 3 hours away. So I decided to do the race. It was interesting because I don't really ride very much. I ride like 3 to 6 hours a week, and the race itself took me like 3 hours and 20 minutes. It was a 50K, so like a 30-mile mountain bike race, and I was excited to do it because I love the trails in Pennsylvania. They're super rocky. I don't like going and doing races when it's lots of dirt road riding or lots of non-technical single track. It's just not very rewarding for me. So I was really excited to do this race. Definitely was feeling unprepared. Bike wasn't really working properly. Like the RockShox lockouts are really annoying. And I took it to two different bike shops before I left and nobody could fix it. So I basically rode with 40 millimeters of travel on my fork. And I had done a local race in Squamish. It was like a really short race, like a 9 mile race. It took me 53 minutes. My average heart rate was in the 180s. I haven't done a race like that in forever, like, or maybe ever, like that intense because all my races are long. So I think I was actually fatigued from that as well. And the weather was horrible the day before. It was like 42 degrees and like pouring rain. And I was feeling lonely and I was in my hotel room and like, why am I even here? I just want to go home. And all that to say that you can still show up. And I've done this enough times. I've been racing for over 20 years that I know that you can show up. You can have a day where you're not feeling that great. You can have a day where your equipment isn't working. You can have a day where you're just like kind of like feeling lonely or just not really in it. And you can still have a great day. And I did. It was awesome. Yeah, I didn't feel the greatest in the race. I remember going up the first climb and I just couldn't put out power and I just was going backwards and backwards and backwards. And I was actually okay with it, which was kind of cool. Like that I wasn't upset, I wasn't beating myself up. I was like, "Oh well, interesting." And I was kind of going back and forth with a couple of women and when they passed me, I was actually like legitimately happy for them. Like in the past, I could be happy for my competitors and sad for myself. And this time, I wasn't even sad for myself. I was just happy for them. And I knew like, well, maybe this is like really meaningful for them to be, racing really well. And for me, I just don't really care anymore. I do it because it's fun and I just like riding new trails and being around people. So having no ego involved with it was actually really fun. Um, the single track the single track was more of a levelizer with not having the best legs for that day because it was quite technical, even though my fork was kind of a shit show. But it actually made it fun to have the fork not work properly. It made it more technical where I had to be even more precise. So I actually enjoyed that. And I talked about this in a Instagram post how I was just so focused and present in the race. I wasn't like mind wandering very much. I wasn't thinking about very many things. I wasn't beating myself up in any way. I was just kind of in it. And it felt good because I have all these things on the go all the time. There's always so many inputs in my life. And when I was racing my bike, it was just so simple and it just was so relaxing. So even though, 3.5 hours, 3 hours and 20 minutes, like that's a long like ride for me right these days, right now, with where I'm at, it was still just like awesome. And I really miss that. Like, I miss having a racing community nearby. I miss having cross country endurance races that I can just drive to. I don't have that anymore. So it was just a nice reflection on that. And to still feel like, there's people I saw at the race that I haven't seen in years that people still remember me and they want to talk to me. And like, it felt good that people actually still care. So that was my reflection of the race. And then I came home and I got sick. So I've been sick for like a week. Just really low energy now, which has been frustrating, but I wouldn't change that because after the race, I had 45 minutes to pack my bike. Then I had to drive 2.5 hours to the airport, and then I boarded a 6-hour flight that got into Seattle late at night, spent the night at a hotel, and then finished my flight the next morning to Vancouver. And then came home and then went straight into solo parenting because Matt had to go out of town for work. So it makes me tired just thinking about it, but that's where I'm at. I just want to give an update and just to share like you just show up and you do it and you just try not to be too hard on yourself. All the things I talk about in this podcast have contributed to me being able to do that. Also, I don't know if I've actually announced this or not, but maybe I did, but I signed a book deal with a publisher. This is a massive goal in my life, a huge thing I've been wanting to do for many, many, many years. I've written so many different versions of a book proposal, and it's changed over the years, but the content, the topic matter is the same. It's like, how do we strive in a way that supports our well-being and performance? So, yeah, I'm really excited about the book. I've been working on it. I feel frustrated because I only wanna work on it, but I can't. I have to stay balanced. But yeah, it's been really good. I'm in a good spot. I'm just feeling a bit tired because of the sickness and all the craziness. And then I'm actually going on a family cruise to Mexico in a few days with my family. I rarely go on vacation, so this is really going to be a lot of fun. I'm trying to have a little bit more fun, more like of the fun that doesn't have like goals attached to it. Trying to enjoy some more of that, the pleasurable things in life. So yeah, I'm going on a cruise to Mexico with the kids and Matt and my parents. Part of me is like kind of grumpy about it because I just want to work on my book. The other part of me is like, you really need to chill out and it's really good for you and it helps you come back and be recharged and more creative. So I just want to normalize that. Like I almost don't even want to talk about the fact that I'm going on vacation because I feel almost like ashamed of it. But that's just because I'm still disentangling my self-worth being attached to progress and productivity. So just putting that out there. All right. The real reason I'm recording this today is so I record these mindfulness and actions and there's no prompting, no nothing. I just start recording them. I recorded this one that you're going to hear next week a while ago, but I thought, it's good to have a preamble to it because I just dive into these topics and it might be better to understand more about them. I did this last month as well. I did a mindfulness in action about shoulds, like I should be better than this. I should do blah, blah, blah. And then I did a solo episode before the mindfulness in action, kind of going a bit more into why we'd say I should and all the things around it. And that landed really well. It's almost like a mini series, I guess. So I'm just testing this out. Today's episode is a condensed version of a workshop that I did. So I do all of these different types of workshops. I have this 3-part workshop series on how to have more mental agility and resilience in your life. One of them is about cognitive capacities, so like our mental skills. One of them is about emotional and attentional capacity. And then one of them is about adaptive capacity. So today I'm talking more about the emotion and attention capacity that fuels our ability to have more mental agility and being more resilient. And in the podcast you'll hear next week, I'll talk about how people always ask me how I'm so resilient, but I think really they're not asking me about resilience, they're asking me about mental agility. So it prompted me to talk about it. And today I'm going to talk more about it because I actually teach these things, the different types of skills, cognitive skills, emotional skills, attentional skills, and adaptive skills. So if you're looking for a workshop for your business or for your school, don't keep me a secret because I love talking about these types of things. How I got into the field of positive psychology was because I was giving lots of talks about all these hard races that I was doing around the world. And for those of you who are tuning in more in recent years or just for the first time, I've spent 20 years building a career as an ultra endurance athlete. I've raced in 25 plus countries, and the races that I choose are not the sort of sanitized, easy races. Not that those races are easy, but like sanitized races that are predictable and like, everything's well rolled out for you to have a good time. Like I picked the races that are ones that you're a little bit nervous to go to because you're like, whoa, like I don't know how it's going to be to sleep in a yurt in Mongolia or sleep on the ground in the Sahara Desert or, hike my bike over the world's highest mountain pass, things like that. I love those because they help me feel most alive. They're so psychologically rich with lots of novelty, in capacity, mental capacity shifting, perspective shifters. I love that. I love being put out of my element. So that's why I would pick those races. So I would talk about them and people would be like, how are you so resilient? Or how do you do such hard things? Or how do you do so many things? And, it looks like resilience as an outcome because all these races, all these challenges I've taken on in my life have required overcoming certain setbacks along the way because I talk about them because that's how you train yourself to do harder things is you realize that you're more capable than you ever thought that you imagined. You raise the bar, not in a scary way or like in a way that you have to keep raising the bar, but in a way of uncovering the fact that you have these capacities within you already that you're able to use whenever push comes to shove. And when you remember those things, it helps you continue to be strong. And a lot of people, in the resilience world, they're like, I'm tired of resilience. I don't want to be resilient anymore. I've been through enough. So instead of just talking about resilience, I think it's important to talk about agility because that's something that we can use every single day. You don't have to be going through really, really hard moments in order to be agile. One of the core drivers beneath mental agility. And you've heard me talk about just mention kind of the four sort of capacities. But one of them is emotional agility, your ability to notice what's happening, adjust, and keep taking values aligned action in real time. And I'll tell you, I'm talking about these things, but I am not perfect. I'm still working on my emotions. I'm working on really feeling them, not rationalizing them, sitting with them, and that is hard. So just because I'm talking about these things doesn't mean I have everything all figured out, but these are skills that I actively practice and that I actively teach. So why I want to talk about mental agility is that it's a master skill that lets you notice, it helps you shift, it helps you stay aligned with what matters most to you, especially when things are hard. It helps you have that perspective in that space. So, today I'm going to tell you more about how emotional agility and mindfulness fit together. And we just had Jeff Warren and Tasha on the podcast last week. We talked a little bit about mindfulness. We also talked about striving, but I think those things go hand in hand. But we're going to talk about how emotional agility and mindfulness fit together. And we're going to talk about the internal and external shifters that can help you adjust in real time that comes directly from Ethan Kross's work and his book Shift. And then in the next episode, you're going to get the in the moment mindfulness in action that I recorded when I was just out a couple months ago thinking about this that you can do on the move. So that should be pretty fun. So I like to think about mental agility. I talked about these core capacities. Like think about a Venn diagram. You have your cognitive capacity, so like your thinking patterns, which I talked about thinking traps briefly in last month when I was talking about the shoulds. You have your thinking patterns, how you practice optimism. You have mental chatter. You have the practice of real time resilience, and then that's like resourcefulness in the moment, basically. Then you have your, emotional and attentional capacity. So that's like mindfulness, emotional agility, the ability to focus and refocus whenever you get thrown off. And then you have like this adaptive capacity, which is how you adjust and stay values driven under pressure. So when I talk about mental agility, what I mean is your capacity to notice what's happening in your thoughts, in your emotions, and in your body. I'm talking about creating space for it instead of reacting to it or not even noticing it, and how to shift your focus, how to create your own narrative, your own story by using a broadened perspective, and how you can use your behavior to behave in a way that lines up with your values, to what's most important for you. And it doesn't always mean that it feels good. I like to talk about how mindfulness creates the space so that you can notice what's happening without being consumed by it. An example would be, I practice how I told you about this race I just did. Like, I wasn't having this like mental ping pong game happening, but in other races, in other like scenarios, I do have the mental ping pong that happens where there's lots of noise. There's lots of voices in my head telling me all these different things, and maybe they're jerking me around, or external things that I see that are coming into my field of vision. Like maybe I'm giving a talk and people are yawning. Maybe people are passing me, and in a race, and I start thinking I'm not good enough. Like there's all these external environment things that can start messing with your mind. Maybe you're stuck in these like habit loops, these mental habit loops. So being able to first notice what's happening and not being consumed by it is a core skill of being more mindful. And you can practice that in lots of different ways. And that's why I do these mindfulness in action practices, because not everybody wants to sit down or has time to sit down for 10 minutes and do a meditation practice. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And so the mindfulness in actions are about how do you do it whenever you're actually like moving around in the real world. And then emotional agility is what you do with the space. So maybe you've created space, you notice your feelings that you're having, how it feels in your body, but what do you do with that? You want to treat these emotions as data points, not directives, as Susan David says. And then you want to choose a values aligned next move. And if you haven't done a values exercise, I highly encourage you just Google it. There's so many different ways to identify what are the most important things to you. If you don't want to do that, just pay attention in your life. The things that are important to you, but also the things that really make you angry. If something has made you angry, is because one of your values has been crossed. So you can identify it that way. When you put all those things together, you get mental agility, and you get to use that in all of these different contexts in your life. So, how do we practice emotional agility? It's approaching your inner world, which includes your thoughts and your emotions and your stories, with curiosity and compassion, and then acting from your values instead of from impulse. And if you want to go deeper into curiosity, compassion, and kindness, look at Jed Brewer's work. He talks about how we can change our habits, including our mental habits. using these three levers. And my favorite book is Unwinding Anxiety, but he also wrote the book The Craving Mind, and he's been on this podcast numerous times. It's awesome. So whenever you are able to notice what your emotional experience is like, it tells you what you care about, but it doesn't have to dictate how you behave. High emotional agility is linked to better mental health, being more resilient, being better at decision making, higher performance, and relationship quality. So it's definitely something to work on. Susan David is somebody who's done a lot of work in this area, written multiple books, so you can check out her work as well. The problem is when we look at our emotions, we'll label them as like a negative emotion or a positive emotion, and like research does this, right? Negative emotions, positive emotions. In positive psychology, there's something called the broaden and build effect, where when you experience a lot of positive emotions, it actually broadens your perspective and makes you realize that you're not alone in the things that you're doing, and you see all of the resources available to you. But quote negative emotions are also very helpful emotions. They give us lots of information. They can be a source of motivation. So I like reframing negative emotions as just tough or difficult or uncomfortable emotions because they really help us. Helped us evolve to survive, to adapt, and to communicate. Sometimes we'll avoid or ignore these emotions or we don't want to talk about these emotions because we're worried that we'll upset other people. And that can actually cause problems in our relationship if we don't talk about these difficult emotions. Of course, the way you talk about it matters, and suppressing your emotions undermines your resilience. It undermines your health. It's not good for you to suppress emotions. And has been some personal work that I've been doing is there are certain emotions that I suppress because I'm afraid that I'm going to be too much if I talk about them. And part of trust in relationships with friends and family and your spouse is being able to say how you're feeling. There are two really unhelpful patterns that come from what we do whenever we don't express our emotions, when we suppress them. One is bottling. So you're suppressing the emotions, your feelings, you're ignoring them. And maybe there's certain emotions that are easier for you to engage with and others that aren't as easy, like I was saying that I've been working on. That leads to increasing if you bottle and suppress your emotions, it leads to more anxiety, inauthentic relationships, and poor decision making. Or the other thing that happens is you ruminate, and I will make sure that I link in the show notes. I recorded a really comprehensive issue on ruminate, or really a comprehensive podcast on rumination. I think a year ago. That was really good. But ruminating is going over and over and over and over and over in your head without gaining insight. And it could be going over and over about the emotion. And like the unresolved emotion might be what's causing you to ruminate. You're prolonging this emotion. You're not giving it space to breathe. It makes you get stuck in negative loops. That also increases your anxiety. It makes you distracted. It might lower your confidence. So, what can we do here? One of the core tools that you can use to have more emotional agility and also more resilience is emotional granularity. I have a throw pillow. It's like this feelings wheel, and it has all these different words for feelings. I think that if you want to go a step further, like what those feelings feel like in your body, but basically, like being able to name what you're feeling with more precision can really help you. So, like knowing what the difference is between like frustrated versus angry, or sad versus ashamed, or lonely versus dejected, like having a lot of vocabulary words for these feelings and being able to name them and knowing what they feel like in your body. A big part of emotional intelligence is not just being able to label the emotion, but understanding how you feel in your body, the embodied experience of it. When you can label your emotions more accurately, you can regulate them better and respond more effectively. And this is shown over and over in the research. So, as Susan David said, these emotions are data points, not directives. So, they're really useful. So, a practice in real life would be like think of a recent moment where something happened, and this isn't all about hard emotions. This could having a lot of language for positive emotions is really good. But say something happened, and then being able to identify what you felt, what that felt like in your body, and then what that emotion is telling you that you care about. That's a very important piece is when this thing happened and I felt this way, this is what the emotion told me that I cared about. So that could be a practice that you take in today. Let me give you an example. I've been really tired and sick the last week, and I even had to lay in bed, which I don't do very often and I'm trying to get better at when I'm tired. But that makes me feel frustrated, and I'll use another word too, and resistant. I'm resisting the fact that I feel this way. That's partially where my frustration is coming from. And it feels heavy, it feels contracted, but it also feels kind of buzzy, like this, like, "Grr." The emotion is telling me that I care about being engaged in my life. And when I'm tired like that, I'm not engaged in my life. So there's an example of me using emotional granularity. I'm not fixing how I feel, I'm just labeling it and telling myself what's important. And that really helps me. So while I was creating this workshop that I teach, I came up with a 4 step emotional agility process that has an acronym, and it's called Getting Real. So when we get real, we number one, we recognize, we turn toward thoughts and feelings with curiosity and compassion rather than avoiding them. So, example, I'm feeling frustrated because I'm tired. I wonder why I am feeling frustrated. Oh, it was because I want to be more engaged. I want to be doing things. I want to be going out and having fun or seeing people, and then offering myself compassion. You're allowed to have low energy, and this happens to everybody, and it's okay. Okay, so that's the R, recognize. 2, E, examine and unhook. So a lot of times we get hooked into these emotions and these stories that we tell ourselves and we can't let go. And that's why I mentioned rumination is one form of getting hooked. We need to be able to examine and hook so that we can create space between what's happening and the response of those emotions. So creating some space so that we're not just in this like loop where we can't see what's actually happening. A way to do that is by asking questions. What is this emotion telling me? What's at stake here? What's truly important here? And then using language that makes it so that you're not fused with it. So I've talked about non-identification on this podcast before. So instead of saying, I'm sad, you can say, I'm noticing sadness, or sadness is here, sadness is happening. And that helps you reduce the fusion where you're taking more of an observer stance. The next piece is align. So we need to align with our values. And you might be recognizing some of this is from Acceptance and Commitment Therapy ACT. And I've had lots of ACT psychologists on this podcast because I love it. So the A is align with your values. What are the values underneath these emotional reactions that you're having? Maybe you're really angry because somebody did something, and maybe fairness was crossed over. Like your value of fairness was, compromised. Maybe you feel really hurt by what somebody did. Maybe you feel invisible, and that's a need for respect or connection. So being able to link it to something that has meaning to it can really help. And then you can shift from this emotion driven behavior of, I'm going to like give them a piece of my mind, to more values driven actions of how you want to show up, but still address the problem. So you could say something to yourself with a line of like, given what I'm feeling and what I care about, who do I want to be in this situation? And who you are is more aligned with your values and your strengths. Who do I want to be? So we talked about recognize, examine, align. And then the L in real is live it. You want to take small, deliberate actions that reflect your values, even when emotions are there. So, even if you're feeling a certain way, what are small things that you can do to reflect your values? So, an example, going back to the race I talked about at the beginning, is I felt lonely and unmotivated. I didn't want to be there. I just missed my family. It's just how I felt. And there was also guilt because it's like, well, I'm here. I should be grateful that I'm here and I get to do this race, but I'm not feeling that right now. And the small deliberate action that I could take towards my values is I'm still going to show up, and I'm still going to talk to other people. I'm going to connect, and I'm still going to choose to be optimistic and to have a good attitude. And so even though the emotions were there, I still chose how I behaved, and actually that changed my emotional experience in the end. Being able to embrace bothness, that you can hold multiple emotions at once. Like you could be, like I mentioned earlier, in the past when people pass me in a race, I can feel happy for them and sad for myself. You can have both. You can hold fear in one hand and courage in the other. And you can do both. You can hold both of those things and still take action. And you can also focus on these realistic micro changes to help you instead of having really big gestures, because sometimes it's the micro things that you do that make the biggest difference. So, like having somebody give you a hug, um, making a phone call, setting a boundary. Some of these things are not super big things that need to be done, but they're aligned with your values. So, you can say, how can I move towards my values no matter how I'm feeling? So, I'm going to give you an overview again. Getting real. Recognize, turn towards thoughts and feelings with curiosity and compassion rather than avoiding them. E, examine and unhook, create space between stimulus and response to notice these emotions. A, align with values, identify the values underneath your emotional reactions. And then L is live it. Take small, deliberate actions that reflect your values, even when these emotions are present. So think about something that happened today, something that had some emotional resonance to it. Ask yourself, was I brooding? Was I bottling? Or was I practicing agility there? And then ask yourself how you want to show up the next time. Okay, next I'm going to talk about mindfulness, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because I've talked about it a lot on this podcast. There's been lots of meditation instructors, but I just want to bring it up quickly, and then I want to give you another practical tool that you can use so that you can have more mental agility. So we know about what mindfulness is, but it's paying attention. John Kabat-Zinn's definition is paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And that allows you to notice your thoughts and emotions without immediately getting hooked by them. And there's huge benefits for this. It helps you manage anxiety. So if you're an athlete, competition anxiety or performance anxiety, like everything can be viewed as a performance no matter who you are. If you're about to do a podcast or give a talk or have a hard chat, it can help you have better focus and concentration. It can help you spend less time dwelling on mistakes. It can help you make faster decisions under pressure. And it also can help create ideal situations for flow states. And if that's of interest to you, make sure you check out our episode 2 months ago with Dr. Sue Jackson. That was a great one. And so, quickly, I'll give you another tool that you can use. I'm trying to be very tools focused in this podcast, so it's not just theoretical. And one of them that I use all the time, I call it the 3R tool. And again, these are all things that I use in my coaching and in my workshops. The 3R sequence is recognize, regroup, and refocus. So, number one, recognize. Notice when you're off task, when you're distracted, or when you're caught in unhelpful thoughts. That's like a huge part of the mindfulness practice is like I need to just notice whenever I'm distracted. The thoughts right now that are distracting me is this too long? Are you giving people too much information? Are you overwhelming people? Those are just me being distracted from the task at hand. I've noticed them. I noticed I was starting to get caught up in them. Now regroup. So that's step two is regroup. Interrupt the mental or emotional spiral with one breath, or it could be a cue word, or it could be a brief routine. What I just did for myself is I looked up away from my computer. I look at my plants. I could look at the horizon. I do that all the time when I'm getting frustrated with my kids when they won't get in the car. I look up at the horizon. If you're an athlete, an example that I gave when I did this workshop for a basketball team was breath, body, ball. Okay, you could come back to the moment, get connected to your body, focus on the ball. Take your mind off of all those things, come back to the task at hand, and then refocus. That's the third R. Direct your attention back to a specific performance cue that you have or a specific cue in whatever it is that you're doing. So, with athletes, like team sport athletes, it could be like next play. Or if you're like a mountain biker, it could just be like next breath or next corner, something to get you back into the moment. If you are giving a talk, like I talk about the running narrative in my head as I'm giving a talk in real time. What am I going to refocus on? It's like the next bullet point that I need to talk about. And I just need to keep pushing forward instead of getting caught up in these emotions. You notice these are different tools than the emotional agility tools, which are more about feeling and feeling the emotion and understanding what actions you want to take. This type of stuff is more about task oriented attention to interrupt all of the thoughts that get in your way. In the next episode, the mindfulness in action, you're actually going to use movement as your mindfulness lab. So think of this episode as like the practical the training session, and then the next episode is like your lab, your gym, where you get to practice these things. And now I'm going to bring it all together for you, and I'm going to talk about how we can use our environments, our internal or our external environments, to shift our emotions in real time, because those things can also help us change our emotional state. And again, these come directly from Ethan Kross's book, Shift. I did not come up with these myself, and I love that book. But I wanted to give context to them here. So we've talked about number one, identifying what your emotions are, getting real. We've talked about the mindfulness practice of the 3 Rs, and now we're going to talk about the shift. So internal shifters are the levers that you can pull that change your internal state. So these are like your sensations, like your 5 senses, your attention, and your perspective. They're body-based tools. And so sensation is using your senses to change this. You might have heard this about like orienting whenever people are feeling anxious. So, how can you engage with your sense of touch? So like you could splash cold water on your face, or you could physically hold on to something. I use like fidget things. That's a sensation that helps me like manage my energy. You can do short movement or a burst. You could jump up and down. You can use breathing, which is something that we always hear about, like make your exhales longer. You can use music or even certain smells. I have this like essential oil thing that helps me whenever I'll like sniff it, and it helps me calm down. So they don't solve the problem, but these give your nervous system a reset. So what are the things, like what senses are most like relevant to you that you can engage in order to kind of reset yourself to calm your nervous system? So these are your five senses: touch, taste, sight, hearing, and smell. So how can you use one or all of those things to orient yourself in your space? You'll think about how athletes will listen to music before they do a competition, or how people practice like box breathing on the way to work. Like think of all these different examples, how somebody will like go wash their hands in really cold water. These are different ways. So that's one. Sensations are internal shifters. Then there's attention. It's where you put your mind. So you can use the 3R tool, the recognize, regroup, and refocus tool. Performance cues or mantras for yourself is a type of attention. Simple contact points or mindfulness reps. And these are a huge part of like being able to train your attention. And then perspective. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast actually, and it's how you frame what's happening to you. So you can zoom out so you can see the situation from a much bigger vantage point, because when we get stressed, our vision actually narrows. When we experience these harder emotions, it actually narrows. So like what I've done in bike races, I remember I was in Africa when I did this one, because like the visual cue comes into my mind. It's like, I suck. Everyone's going to see how much I suck. Everyone's looking at me. People are going to like not like me anymore. The dumb, like, not, I don't want to say dumb, but like the silly thoughts that we have. And so I actually zoomed out and I imagined like myself as a dot, like from outer space. That was the way I zoomed out. Or how you can also use mental time travel. So like how can you imagine how this moment is going to feel in the future? So I do this at bike races. If I'm having a hard time, like a 100-mile race is really long, and if I'm miserable in that moment, I'll tell myself, well, in like 3 hours, you're just going to be sitting at the finish line, or 5 hours, or however long you're going to be sitting at the finish line. And this moment just won't seem as intense as it is right now. And that really helps me. You can use distance self talk. So using talking to yourself using you or your name. And I say you to myself, or I call myself Looney. You can also use compassion to challenge and create perspective. Like, what would you tell somebody else if it wasn't you? So, basically, ways to just unfuse yourself from the thing to create some space from it. So, zooming out, using distance self talk, mental time travel, challenging the story. And then there's also external shifters. So, the things that are outside of yourself, they're in your environment, in your relationships, and the greater culture and system that you're in that helps support you. So the physical space that you're in, spending time in nature, like if you are frustrated, go for a walk or look at a tree, or look at a picture of green space. Tidy your workspace if you are feeling a bit dysregulated, or maybe you have lots of things in your workplace or in your house that make you feel good. Like look at those things. You can remove these temptation triggers that create more stress and anxiety for yourself. So, how your physical space is can actually shape how well you're able to cope. So, I know that there's certain spaces of my house, like I'm not like a neat freak at all, but there's certain spaces of my house that I need to have be tidy, only a very few ones. But when those aren't tidy, it's harder for me to be more regulated. Another form of external shifter is people, like who you talk to and how. So, like, who are the trusted people in your life that you can tell about your feelings so that they can give you some emotional support, but also give you concrete advice? Because Ethan Cross talks about this in both of his books, actually. He talks about co rumination. So, we'll talk to a friend and we just get spooled up even more and we don't even solve any problem in the end. And sometimes you do need to vent, but a lot of times you also need to get somewhere with the venting where you're moving out of the emotion instead of just staying stuck in there and creating more and more of a downward spiral. And that also involves asking for the type of support you need, like telling someone, can you just listen to me for a little while without offering advice? And then whenever you're ready, can you help me problem solve? So that type of cueing can be really helpful. And then also a big thing that drains our agility is social comparison. So how much time are you spending online comparing yourself to other people? How much time and energy are you spending when you're at the gym? I do this, like looking around and being like, oh, that person has a six pack and I don't. So I guess, blah, blah, blah story you tell yourself. Like social comparison does not help if you're doing it in a way that does not inspire you. So just noticing that's an external thing, like looking at your phone or looking around you and comparing yourself to people. So how can you work through that? And then the last is the culture that you're in, the team that you're on, the language that your family uses. In our family, me and my kids and my husband, we try to really normalize struggle and mistakes as something that's good. In fact, my son says, "But mom, you like doing hard things." Like he reminds me of those things sometimes. And having rituals in your family or like in your work environment that help you create calm and control and familiarity so that you can co regulate together, so that you can show up as your best self and be more agile. And also having psychological safety in your place, in your spaces where you can be honest and take risks without worrying about negative repercussions. So in our family, this is something we're trying really hard to work on around lying of, hey, like it's okay that you made a mistake or it's not okay that you lied, but like just tell me about it and you won't get in trouble and we'll talk about like the learnings that come from it. So you can do a little energy audit for yourself. Like which shifters of these, there's the internal shifters using sensations, attention, and perspective, and the external shifters of space, people, and culture that help you. So like which ones you use are which ones are easy to use, which ones you never use, and which ones might be a bit easier for you. And what's one shifter you can use this week to just experiment with. So I know it's a lot of information. Sometimes I'm like, am I covering too much? But I like to give you all the information, then you can decide what you want to do with it. So today we talked about agility. We talked about the emotional and attentional capacities that give us more mental agility. We talked about mindfulness as the foundation to create space and awareness so you can see what's happening. We talked about emotional agility as the builder so that you can treat emotions as data and choose values aligned actions. And then we talked about internal and external shifters as the tools so that you can use sensation, attention, perspective, space, people, and culture to help you shift yourself in real time so that you can show up as your best self. And then the tools I talked about was the getting real tool from the emotional agility and the 3 R's tool from mindfulness. So, in the next episode, we're going to pull ourselves out of this theoretical space and into real life with a mindfulness and action practice that you can do when you're outside, walking, running, driving, whenever. And we'll practice noticing the shifting in real time. So, think of that episode as your on the move mental agility lab. Thank you so much for being part of this community and caring about building these skills. The learning journey never ends, and I'm right here with you. As I said, I've been working on all these things all the time. If you want tools and handouts to go with things like this, make sure you go to my Substack and that you're subscribed to the podcast. My Substack is Grow the Good. I've been writing about lots of different things on there. I'll see you in the next episode where we will work on our mental agility together. And as always, I'm with you on this journey of personal growth, adventure, and our mission to be better every day.